Hey everyone, this is MTV. Welcome to my crib. Today we're going to be touring our guest Tomoki, and his crib is called Figma. He's going to tell us a little bit about how we can use Figma, which is a free design tool. I'm sure he'll tell you much more about it to create and design your own mockups for your web apps. And I'll just let Tomoki take it away. Tomoki?
All right. So hi guys, I'm Tomoki and I'm the ACM Design president. And like Matt said, I'm going to show you guys the basics of Figma today. So first things first, you want to go to Google and type in Figma, or if you want to use DuckDuckGo, it's up to you. But search for Figma. It's a free software, so you can just search it up on Google and make an account and log in, or you can use your Google account to log in. Both works, whichever you like. So can you guys kind of give a thumbs up if you guys are logged into Figma and ready to go?
I also believe if you use your UCLA email, you get free things. So I think you should probably use that if you can.
I think a free account is okay though, unless you really want to use really advanced features. For the most part, the free version works completely fine. It's pretty feature rich. So if you did log in, you should see this screen right here. It's a bunch of, they call these boards. So again, if you guys are ready, give me a thumbs up on the screen, like emoji or in person.
While we wait, Tomoki, do you just want to talk a little bit about the alternatives to Figma and maybe why you like Figma over stuff like?
Oh yeah, that's actually a good question. Good point. So Figma, there's a lot of softwares to make graphics, and Figma is one of them. But one big key element or feature of Figma is that it's browser-based. So you don't have to install any software to get started. You can just log into Google or log into Figma on any web browser and get started. There is a desktop version, but it's not that different. The web version works perfectly fine. Whereas other softwares like Adobe Illustrator or what was that called? Inkscape, you have to download it and it's kind of heavy sometimes. And another thing about Figma is that's completely free. There are paid options, but the free version is again, really feature rich. For 99% of the time, it works completely fine. And the third advantage of Figma is that it's really curated towards web design. So if you are using Figma to make web mockups, it's really easy because a lot of the features kind of optimized for making websites, dragging text box and making web pages, stuff like that. But of course, if you want to make graphs for say AI presentation, that also works because it's really another key feature of Figma is that it's really easy to make graphics. I'll get into details later, but compared to softwares like Illustrator, it's really intuitive to make nice, pretty graphs and shapes.
Okay, sounds good. I think everyone has a Figma account now, so we can get back on track.
You guys all see the screen? Should look more or less like this. Okay, so if you go to the top left, there's this place called Drafts. So if you click on the plus next to it, it should create a new file. So you can just choose the blank canvas because, want a fresh blank slate. Do you guys all see the screen? All right. So first thing you want to do is make a canvas. So what you see right here is just a blank screen. So, and you can't, if you say make a square here, you can't really export this. To export something, which you obviously want to do at a later point, you first need to define a canvas, and that's where you actually put in your graphs and export it out. So if you go to the top left, there's this tool right here. It's called Frame. Keep mixing up the terminology with web and Figma and Illustrator. So sorry if I get that mixed up, but it's called Frame. So if you drag it out like this, you get a frame. Do y'all see this? So this is where you usually make your graphics. So say if you're making a website, you would usually make this, 1920 pixels times 1080 pixels because that's the size of a full HD computer screen. Or if you're making a flyer, you'll make it the same size as a A4 printing paper. And let's see. Let's just make it a square for now because I think that's a pretty standard size. And for the most part, the controls are pretty similar to PowerPoint. So if you ever used PowerPoint before, you know how to use 50% of Figma. That's the cool part about Figma. It's pretty intuitive. So if you click on the frame, do you see on the top left, it says like frame 1? So if you put anything into Figma, it's all going to be listed out here, which is going to be kind of important later on when you have like a lot of objects in your screen. So let's see. I think a good start is to make a star. I think that's what Hakan, the other ACM Design president, likes to do when he gives Figma tutorials to other people. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the top toolbar again. And you guys see this tool? It looks like a pen. So if you click on that, make sure it's pen. There's another thing called pencil, but for now I want to use pen. You should see this pen tool pop. Like the mouse turns into a little pen. So click on that. You can start dragging lines like this. So for now, this is the first object we're making. So let's keep it simple. Just make a star like this. And there. Do you guys see this? It's kind of hard to keep track of like progress because I only see my own screen. But if you made the start, you can click on done at the top left. It says done. So if you click on done, it'll turn into like a full-fledged object, which you can like drag around and resize. Again, it's mostly like PowerPoint. So it's almost exactly the same.
Tomoki, I've got a question for you. I don't know that much about design. Is what you made like a JPEG or like an image, or is it something else?
Oh, thank you for asking that. Yeah, I should have clarified it first. So Figma is a tool that makes something called vector art. So what that means is, let's say the star right here, the star you see right here. So, so before that, do you guys know the difference between pixel and vector images? Okay, so pixel images are what it sounds like. It's images made up of a bunch of little dots, like pixels. Like most photos you take on your phone or like a camera are like pixel based. Whereas a vector image, so in the example, so in the case of the star, how it works is the computer records a point for every one of these vertices. And it also records that between like say this and this vertice, there's an edge. Between this and this, there's an edge. Like instead of recording individual pixels on the image, it records like the edges and the vertices of the object. So what that means is when you zoom in, what the computer does is it re-renders the entire image every time you like move it around or zoom in. So theoretically, this thing has infinite resolutions because again, this doesn't use pixels. It only records like the vertices and edges. So if you zoom in, it'll just like re-render based on the vertices and the edges, it'll just re-render everything. So you can see like, I'm really zoomed in right now, but you still see the really crisp edges.
Just to add on.
Used, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Oh, and that's why it's used a lot in like web development because like, especially like modern phones have like really high resolution screens. And if you use pixel-based images, if you zoom in, you kind of see like the little jagged edges and it doesn't look pretty. Whereas if you use a vector image, it'll look really crisp, even on like really, like 4K phones. If that's a thing, I think it is.
Yeah, just to add on two very quick things. So one is that in your learning labs, you will probably use SVGs to some extent, especially if you're going to animate squares over something or simple geometric shapes, because as Tomoki said, you'll get infinite resolution. The other thing I'll point out that's kind of out of the scope of this design in particular is that SVGs are much easier to manipulate with CSS and JavaScript than images, like a PNG or a JPEG or something. So, Maya was talking about using the transition or animation keywords for that glass animals thing. You can apply those keywords to points in an SVG. So you can like bend a shape or move it around or shake it or make the lines thicker or thinner. All that kind of stuff can be done with CSS animations. So if you want to animate like a convolutional neural network going over, having the filter move or something like that, you could do that with CSS as well if you use an SVG. So that's just another benefit of using vector-based art. Does that make sense? Liddy?
Oh, and also not Legion of that, but I don't know what you guys don't know. So if you guys have any questions, like just shout it out because I'm used to like teaching this, assuming like my audience has some background in design, which I don't think is really the case this time. So if you have like any confusions or questions, just yell it out and I'll address it immediately. Okay, so we have this ugly star, but that's okay. Everything's pretty. So if you select it, if you go to the right side, this is where you configure all the settings. I think the main ones would be the color and the stroke. So if you go to the part where it says stroke, that's basically the line. So if you click on the black right here and make it red, you can see the line turns red. Select it again. And if you go to this part, it's like 3 horizontal lines. You can make it, let's say it's like 40. That'll make, oh my God. That'll make the line really thick. And if you go to this part which says fill, right now it doesn't have anything enabled, so let's click on the plus. And as you can see, it'll add a fill. So it's kind of like the bucket tool, sort of. Let's make this a easily distinguishable color. Let's make it red. Or, sorry, blue. Oh, I'm tired. So those are the basic settings. And you'll also, I don't know if I should go into it, but there are like kind of like web development specific settings like alignment. But I think it's not really relevant this time around, so I'll kind of skip over it. But basically, these are kind of settings that are really useful if you're making like web mockups, if you want to like align shapes like specific aspects. Constraints and alignment, these are like, again, web specific settings. So let me get into the editing the vector images. So the thing I mentioned earlier, how it's like really intuitive to make images in Figma, I'll show you what I mean and see if I can get it right. So if you go to the toolbar and click on this, the little arrow, that's like the basic selection tool. So if you click on that and click on the star again, if you double click it, it'll go into this mode where you can individually edit the vertices like this. So do you guys see this? Like, can you guys do it on your computer?
How do you do it again?
Oh, so say, let's go back to default. Make sure you have the selection tool selected and double click on the object. An easy way to tell if you is to see like, you see the little circles on the vertices. That's how you can tell if you're in like the edit mode. Actually, I don't know what this mode is called. Like, I think in Illustrator it's called like, or no, in Blender it's called like.
In Illustrator it's called direct selection mode. So I think it's something like that.
Oh,
because you're modifying the individual anchor points, right?
Yeah. I don't know why I remember terminologies in Blender. So once you have that, you can click on the pen tool again. And what you can actually do is if you click on the vertices, or one of the vertices and click on another vertex, you can add a line like this. And it seems like a really basic feature, but a lot of other softwares don't allow you to do this. It's because most softwares force you to make lines in like a complete, you can only, or sorry, I'm choking. You can't like have vertices that have more than 2 edges in most softwares, but Figma allows you to do that. So right, this node right here has 3 edges. Figma allows you to do that. And that also allows you to do interesting things. So if you go right here, do you guys see like this square with like the bottom half filled? So click on that. You can like select individual areas to decide which area has like the paint, the fill applied. So right now I just click this. So this part has the gray fill applied. Let me make it blue so it's easier to see. See, this part has the blue fill, but this part's like empty. So that means if I put like a square over it, you can't see the gray square because this part has the blue fill, but this part's empty, so you can see the gray square behind it. Oops, sorry. So let's actually do something a bit more practical. Oh, and by the way, if you click on it and click on an object and hit delete, it should delete it. Let me go back. So if you're in the direct edit mode, I think I said that right. If you click on a vertex and hit delete, it'll delete like an individual vertex. But if you double click on the background, kind of exit the direct edit mode. If you click on the whole object and hit delete, it'll delete the whole thing. Again, it's like pretty much like PowerPoint. Okay, so let's do something a bit more interesting. So I think you guys, I think Nisha, you said you're from AI, right?
Yeah.
So let's try making like one of those diagrams that describe like deep neural network with like a bunch of plates like stacked on top of each other. So there's several ways to do that. So one way, let's first off make a square. So if you go to the top toolbar again, there's a rectangle tool. And you can drag a rectangle like that. And by default, rectangles don't have any like outlines, and it's like just plain gray, and we want to change that. So let's click on the rectangle, go to the right. Let's actually set the fill to, so we click on the square right here, and on the drop down, click on, actually let's keep it to solid. If you go down here, there's this part. So if you set it all the way down like this, it'll make it completely transparent. And then go to this part, see where's the stroke. And click on the plus to add an outline, and that should make like a black outline. Let's kind of resize it a bit like this. Hold on, let's see if I remember this right. Okay, so if you click on the rectangle, it's kind of hard to click on it because you can't really click in the middle. You have to click on the line because we made the middle part transparent. If we click on the line and press on Alt, or I'm on a Windows computer, so I don't know. Actually, let's not use shortcut keys because if you guys are like on Macs, it's not really gonna apply well. So if you click on the rectangle, right click, and hold on. There should be a duplicate. Use mouse. I always use a shortcut key, so I kind of forget the menu sometimes. Let's just use copy paste. So if you select a rectangle and hit Control C, or I think Command C on Mac, can Control V. It's kind of hard to tell, but if you move it apart, you'll have two rectangles now. So what we want to do is place this right on top of the first rectangle and kind of shrink it down like this. I'm just going to adjust the size a little. Yeah, there you go. So again, if you double click on the double rectangle, you'll go into the direct edit mode. And what you can do is you can select the top two vertices like this. And if you drag while holding shift, I think that's like it's the same across Mac and Windows. You can drag it across like this. Ooh. So I guess you guys can kind of tell where this is going. And ooh, I just realized this is not that pretty. Okay, so as you guys probably noticed, this part looks kind of ugly. So we're going to fix that. So double click on the bottom rectangle. And again, select the top two vertices like this, and you can drag it down. And that actually kind of still looks ugly, but sort of better. Or actually, hold on. I just realized a better way, like the Figma way to do this would be to delete the bottom rectangle. If you double click on the top rectangle and go to the pen tool, you can click on this part right here, the bottom vertex, and kind of draw a rectangle like this. Is it working? Hope it's working. Oh wait, hold on, something's wrong. Oh, sorry. Oh no, it's not working. Why? Oh, wait.
Are we trying to build an IKEA table? Sorry, I missed the last one.
Yeah, basically.
Sounds good.
All right.
IKEA
Okay, sorry.
tables are hard.
Okay, sorry. So go back to this step. Double click on this. Click on the pen tool. Drag a rectangle like this. Honestly, Hakan's better at Figma because he's like the design president. But he said he's going to come, but he's absent for some reason. Weird. So if you click on this tool again, the little diamond, and click on this part, you'll see it adds the line. And I'm going to do some adjustments again. You kind of see that starting to take shape. And I'm gonna copy this again, copy and paste it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this right here. I'm not actually gonna use it, but I'm just gonna use it as a guideline. So if I double click on this again and go back to the pen tool, did I apply the pen tool correctly? I feel like I didn't, but oh well, it works. You can drag a line like this, connect it right here, and use the diamond thing again. I don't know what this is called actually. Paint bucket. Oh. So, okay, so if I delete this, you can see like a typical deep neural network diagram block. I'm kind of surprised like how many people don't do this. I know like this research lab that my friend was in, and they, instead of making graphs like this, they like expressed everything using LaTeX. And it was like so hard to follow through. So do you guys have this right here? Do you guys are you guys stuck or anything? Thumbs up or down? All right, cool.
Is there a way to make your frame bigger after you've like already established it?
Oh, you mean like the size of this block, you mean? Or this frame itself?
The frame itself.
Oh yeah, so it's the same as any shape. You can just click on the frame. You have to click on like the edge of the frame, like this. And then you can just resize it like this at your own will. And also this is a good time to kind of introduce you to this part. So if you select like a square or like any circle or any object, you can manually specify the size. So if you go to the part where it says W, that's the width. So if I set the W to 500, it's like exactly 500 pixels wide. If I set the height to 500, so it's a 500 by 500 pixel frame now. And this is kind of important if you're exporting this to like a website or something, because you don't want to make sure your image is like the right size. Like, technically, size doesn't matter because it's vector, but it's just good practice to make it like. Actually, it's good practice to make it 512 because we're CS people. 512 by 512.
The size will matter if you don't change the SVG size with your code. So I would recommend pick a reasonable size that doesn't make the thing too bad if things don't work properly, because some people disable JavaScript on their browsers, and we'll talk about that in our accessibility workshop. But just keep that in mind. So don't make it like super, super big. It'll like crowd the entire screen.
Based on my experience, it's usually between like 256 by 256 to like 2056 by 2056. That's like that's a reasonable range for a size of an image on a website. Okay, so I think we have this block now. So one thing we actually want to do is click on it and go to fill and click on the plus, and let's fill it white, and you'll see why in a moment. And now if you copy and paste, I don't know if you guys use a Windows, but at least on Windows, you can hold Alt and drag and it'll like duplicate it like this. You should just hold Alt and drag it and it'll like automatically duplicate it. And now we got this like really savvy deep neural network diagram. Or this is like more a convolutional neural network, but whatever. It gets the point through. So do you guys have this? So let's say we want to add another layer that's smaller. One way to do that would obviously be to just shrink it, but it doesn't look right because not only the height and the width, but the depth is also shrunken, so it looks like kind of off. So we don't want to do that. Instead, what we want to do is go and double click on it and go into direct edit mode again, and kind of like manually shrink it like this. Or wait, hold on, that's not a good way. So if you hold shift and select vertices, you can select multiple vertices at once. So then you can just shrink it down like this. And that kind of shrinks it vertically and horizontally, but not in the z-axis. So it looks like more right. I don't know if there's like a formal way to do this, but nah, this works. There you go. Actually, I want opinion from an AI person. Is this like like a reasonable AI diagram.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
So let's try to make this into a convolutional neural network. So what I'm gonna do is, if you guys ever seen like, oh, I'm sure you guys are, yeah, you've probably seen it. If you like, for like diagrams on convolutional neural networks, there's like a little like a beam coming out from like a bigger layer to like a smaller layer to kind of express how convolutional networks kind of add up the matrices. So I'm gonna try to do that here. So I'm gonna use the pen tool again and kind of make this sort of thingy. And by default, the color of the outline and the fill is going to be the same as whatever object you touched last. In this case, like, white fill and like black outline, it kind of like blends in too much with the background. It's hard to see. So we're going to change it. So the stroke, let's actually get rid of the stroke and make the fill like bluish, light blue. That's a pretty reasonable color. And I'm going to also set the opacity. So that's how like transparent is. I'm going to set it to like 35%ish, or that's too light. Let's make it like 40, 50%. So it looks like this. I'm actually gonna make this a bit smaller. I think it's still too big. Ooh. Or wait, I could just select these three like this. There you go. I feel like I'm doing something wrong. I really have to review my AI stuff. But I think visual-wise, it's okay. And obviously that's not enough, so I'm just gonna add another object, use the pen tool again, and make it look like this.
How did you make that green shape? Because when I try to do stuff, like it's not letting me fill.
Oh, so first things first, make sure you double click on the background and like deselect all objects. And then click on the pen tool up here. And I'm just gonna make like a random shape just to show an example. Make sure you close the kind of the loop like this. And once you have this, go to the settings on the right and see what's a stroke. Click on the minus sign, that gets rid of the stroke. And then click on the plus sign next to fill, and that adds like a fill, that kind of fills in the color. And then you can just set it to any color, transparent, red, whatever. Oh, let me delete that. So I'm gonna do the same for this. Ooh. Not that. So it's also completely filled. There you go. I think I made it too light, but I can kind of still see it. It's a quick drop, so I'm not gonna spend hours like trying to optimize everything. I feel like this is not how convolutional neural networks work. Oh well, but it gets the point through. Do you guys have this? Any questions? All right, so.
Wait. That was like a nod of no. We'll just take a bit and see if we can figure this out.
Yeah, do you guys have any questions? You guys stuck on any part? Oh, and I almost forgot. So sometimes you'll notice that, like, let's say you want this to be like in the front, like you want this to be like above the green, this thing. But right now it's behind it. So to fix that, there's several ways, but you see this left part, this is where this comes in handy. So to make this rectangle like the frontmost thing in the image, you want to drag it up so it's right here, and you'll see now it's above this green projection, so it looks like correct. There's also a bunch of shortcut keys, but again, I'm not going to go too much into shortcut keys because I think it just like confuses people. But if you show them shortcut keys on the first time. So yeah, that's how it's supposed to be. Let me adjust this. There you go. Beautiful.
So in order for you to be able to fill a shape, it has to be closed off.
Yeah. I mean, actually, let me check because Figma's like pretty.
No, yeah, it has to be closed off. That's how SVGs work.
But in general, it's just good practice to make sure you like close objects. Let me actually double check. That's a good question, actually. Can I fill? No, you can't. Yeah, you have to like close off, make like a loop to fill objects.
Yeah, the underlying code, like Tomoki will tell you in a moment that you can export this as code or as an asset. It doesn't support unclosed shapes and fill. So you have to like basically follow what the SVG spec lets you do. Also just mindful of time. I originally thought this was gonna be 30 minutes. I guess this is gonna turn more into an hour. But if you could also, I know we should probably cover exporting this and maybe some other properties, but also if we could do a quick run through of like some general web design mock-up tips you had, like when you were doing the rework, for example, like landing page, nav bar, blah, 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 stuff like that.
Okay, I think I don't have time to do
time.
all of them, so I'm gonna have to choose one, I think. Either like exporting stuff or like general web design.
Export is really easy, right? I mean, you just select the asset, export at different sizes.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, let's just do that in like a minute. So if you click on the frame, like choose whichever frame you want to export. So if you click on it, you can go to this toolbar again. There's a part called export. Let's hit the plus. So this is if you want to export it as like an image or a PDF or an SVG or a JPEG, but usually an image. So you can select like the size and the format, and you hit like export frame one. It'll just like export it. It's probably not showing up on the screen share, but if you click on the downloaded image, you can see this thing I just made as like a PNG image. And I don't know if they allow you to export. Yeah. So another thing I think Matt just mentioned, you can export as a code. So if you select like an object, and if you go to the sidebar and click on the part that says code, you can actually see this object as like CSS code. So this is pretty useful if you want to like export this into like a website. You don't have to like recode everything. You can just like throw in everything, throw in the object, then throw like copy and paste this whole code. And it'll just like show up on the website as you see it right here. Just pretty convenient. Though I've never seen anyone actually use that feature personally, because like a lot of times you actually want to like optimize the code for like your specific website. But it's just good to know in case you want to, just make a website real quick. So that's actually the basics of the shapes. Like you guys at least know enough to make your own pretty AI diagram. So I'm gonna go over to the web development aspect. So let's see if I can pull up. I'm actually gonna pull up the official ACM rebrand that's going on right now. See if I can find it. Where'd it go? Rebranding, there you go. ACM rebrand. Version 2. Should I use this? No, let's use a different one. Okay, so this is like a work in progress, but I think it's a good like a template for like a basic rule on web design. So actually I'm gonna make a fresh new frame just for the sake of this tutorial. So I'm gonna drag a frame again, like right next to it. I'm gonna make it roughly the same size as this mockup. And usually I've seen some people make like frames like this. And if they want to have like a website with a lot of content, they like do like this. But I personally think it's kind of inefficient because you have like a bunch of gaps and it's kind of hard to make designs. It's usually easier to just have like one really tall frame like this. So I think we have like 15 minutes. I see how much I can crunch in here. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna pull up like a reference image that I'm gonna use to try to make this go quick. Hold on a bit. Recent. Oh, there it is. Okay, so let's say you're making like a front page, like a really generic front page with like the name of your website, maybe like a one sentence catchphrase and like an image. What you want to, first thing you want to do is make sure you have like sufficient margins. So one thing I see a lot of beginner people do is like when they see like a frame, they think it's like free real estate and they like try to fill up everything. Like they try to film like the whole web page with content, but you really don't want to do that. You want to have like sufficient margins. Again, I'm going to skip over like a lot of advanced features because I think it's going to take too long, but one easy way is just make like a rectangle like this to kind of give yourself like a visual margin. So this, you really don't want to put anything in this region. So so you click on the T right here, that's text. So you can drag a text box like this and just start typing like, hello, welcome to my site. And if you go to the right toolbar, there's like options for text. I'm gonna make the font, big enough so you can see it. So make it like 48. And I'm gonna drag in an image. Oh, so if you want to add an image, you can just go to Google and like, let's say I'm gonna search up cat. And just like right click on any image, hit copy image, and hit paste. They'll just pop in like this. That's another nice thing about Figma. It's really easy to copy and paste images from like Google. You actually can't do that in like Illustrator. You can, but it's like really unstable. But Figma is like just copy and paste from Google and boom, you have something. So that's that. So another really common thing you want to watch out when you do design is you want to watch out for alignment. Like one thing I see again with like a lot of beginners that people just kind of like put stuff wherever they wanted to, but in general things look really nice when like, things are like perfectly aligned. Like for example, in this case, I'm going to align this text with this cat image like this. It's like vertically aligned. And also spacing, that's another really important thing. So I'm going to make sure that the spacing between the text and the left border is like roughly the same as like the space between the cat image and the right border. A bit more like complicated example of this is this website I'm working on right now. That's actually my portfolio site. Actually, I'm going to work on this. So let me turn something on. You'll see this grid right here. This is what I'm using to like manage spacing. So again, the red line is like used to manage spacing and alignment. So it might look like things are like randomly placed all over, but if you use the grid, you can see that things are like aligned with the grid to give it more organization. And again, like I just said earlier, you want to have like sufficient spacing between text and images. Like let's say if what's happening? If I cram everything together like this, again, this is something a lot of beginners do. Like when they write up reports, like when I see a lot of people like write academic reports, like their page looks like this, like all the text and image like crammed into the whole page. But that just makes it really hard to follow like the text. It's really hard to see what you're supposed to see.
What academic reports are you reading that look like this, Tomoki?
So I'm in this research lab right now.
Oh, sorry. I was like kind of joking about like the text spam. I agree that like in general, things could be more readable. Something to think about as well when we're making our learning lab, right? We're not only just teaching college students who are used to reading papers or people like Tomoki who's in a lab, right? We're now marketing towards high schoolers who don't want more homework and stuff like that. So things like adding margin, giving space, making the page not feel crowded is probably going to be even at a larger premium than normal because of the audience that we're marketing to.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why well, to be fair, I'm one of those people that uses a lot of white like spacing between text and images. I know Hakan was like, I showed this to Hakan, the other president, and he was like, haha, classic Tomoki white space. And I was like, okay. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to say is like my design tends to use a lot of space, but so this is kind of like an extreme end of like using spaces, but this is kind of what you want to do. Have sufficient spacing between things. Let me turn off the grid because it's kind of annoying to see hard to see the design. So let me actually kind of scroll through the website. You can see the top. So another important concept in design is something called hierarchy. So, and let's ignore this image for now, just focus on the text. So in this case, see how this header, it's kind of a header, the first thing you want to see, is like really big and it's bold. And this little introduction I wrote is like smaller font, lighter color. So what that does is people will naturally read this part first, hello and welcome. And then they go to, I'm currently a senior at UCLA studying computer science, blah, blah, blah. So again, hierarchy, this is another important concept. You want to use like font sizes, font colors to kind of direct people's order of how they see things. In this case, again, people will naturally see this first, which is how it's supposed to be because it's like a hello. And then they read this, which is like a short intro of me. And same thing for this page, like first they're supposed to see this, like, so what can I do? And then below it in a smaller font and like a lighter color, I say, oh, I can do this and this and that. Same thing here, like languages, what languages can I do? I can do this language, that language, blah, blah, blah. And it really makes it really easy to follow through the website. Okay, and this is like it might be just me, but one thing I really want to kind of like make a point here is that one thing I see a lot of people do is for some reason, some people love making like all the text like center aligned. So let me demonstrate what I mean by that. So they align the text like this. Or they make the spacing really small. Like they kind of like write text on their website as if they're writing like a report on a Word, like Microsoft Word. Let me show you what I mean. Oh, there you go. 100. So when I see a lot of like beginner web developers make text on their website, a lot of times they write it like this. Again, like it looks exactly like a Microsoft Word text, like single spaced, black font, like really tight. But this is, this isn't Microsoft Word. You have like a lot more freedom over how you design your text. And not only does this look kind of ugly, but it's also like actually hard to read. And again, like Matt said, like when you're trying to convince like, high schoolers at their home that's like 3 feet away from their PlayStation, you really want to make sure your text like website is really easy to follow, so they like stay concentrated they stay concentrated a lot longer. So one tip I have is to make the text not pure black, but like slightly grayish, and then add more spacing, like not double space, but I make my like 1.7 space. And I usually like to keep the text left aligned. So when your eye is like following the text, when it's like center aligned, what's going to happen is when you reach the end of a line and you try to go back to the beginning of the next line, like every line has a different beginning point. So you kind of have to like kind of try to find where the next line begins. And it sounds like a really minor thing, but when you have like hundreds of lines, like, people read a lot through like a whole website. If it happens over and over, it can get kind of annoying. So that's out of the way.
So is there a way to easily, I know that like Figma allows you to convert it to CSS. So would you do that for this website, or would you write your own and then just use this as a guide?
Oh, so it's definitely possible to export as a CSS. So again, if you click on, let's say I select this front page area, select everything. If you go to code, you can see the CSS for this. So this is like everything you need to render this web page. And there's actually a lot of advanced features that allows you to like just export this thing as like a full-fledged website, which I don't think I have time now. I'll show like a glimpse of it. So I think there was actually a Figma where we practiced that within ACM Design. Let's see if I can find it real quick.
Just to say very quickly though, in terms of how you would implement that feature yourself, so there's a line height property in CSS, and that changes the line height that Tomoki was talking about, so that gives your text more space. The one thing I'll say against Figma exporting, it's super convenient. I definitely recommend it if you're like short on time, but the positioning is just hard to do programmatically really well. Like mentally, if you have watched the videos, like we've talked about CSS grid, and Flexbox and these dynamic responsive ways that you can position stuff on your screen. Versus with Figma, so far, we haven't covered advanced features like viewports yet. So everything is statically attached to the page. So if you resize the browser window, or if someone's using a phone instead, we haven't really coded that ourselves. So no matter what you do, unless you use those advanced Figma features, you either should export and edit or just implement it yourself, because there are other things that we still need to consider. And like accessibility, for example, we haven't talked about image alt texts yet, or semantic stuff like that. But sorry, Tomoki, go ahead. And did I answer the question kind of, Maya? Okay.
Where'd it go? Hold on, let me try to find it. Oh wait, it's probably in the recent. If I can't find, I'm just gonna give up. But let's see if I can see. Hold on. So there's that.
I guess in the meantime, while Tomoki finds the file, just like a quick recap and how this is relevant for us. So hopefully you've actually picked up 2 valuable skills today. The first is just some basic graphic design stuff. So if there are relatively simple graphics that you want to have for your convolutional neural network demo or a filter demo or some diagram, you should be able to make them yourselves now. Obviously, if there's like a really good one you can find online and it's free to use, just use that. But now you have a lot of freedom there. And then hopefully the second nice thing is that now you've gotten a bit of a taste of how Figma can help you lay out your website. Because if you just design your website by coding it straight, figuring out all this alignment stuff and making the padding and the margin and all that kind of stuff great is like very tricky. Versus now you have very easy tools that make it easy for you to prototype your website, like share it with your friends, go back and forth with me and Arjun and figure out if it's exactly what you want without having to code everything. And then once we do this step, then we'll actually implement it with code. And I think you'll find that it's really easy to implement this with code once you visually know what it's going to look like. Because at least for me, that's the hardest part of making this web app stuff.
So here's the part where Matt was kind of talking about. It's a feature called auto layout. So it basically allows you to like specify like which object is like how it's related to another object. So what that means is if I like say resize this, can you like see how the bubbles like moving along with the rectangle? So let's say like I decided to open this like a chat mockup on like an iPad. You want to make the screen bigger, right? So you can see that automatically adjusts the layout. So that kind of fits the screen more naturally. This is a feature called, again, it's called auto layout. It's pretty complicated, so I don't think I can explain it now, but you can like kind of Google it and look into tutorials. I think Figma has like an official tutorial on this. And once you do this, I think it makes it a lot easier to actually export it as like an actual functional code. Yeah, you can see, like I think Matt mentioned this earlier, Flexbox. You can see it in the code right there. Oh. And I think another important thing about design is that, well, like I think a really common question I get is like, hey, Tomoki, how do you like, is there like a rule or like a law or like a tutorial I can read to get better at design? And what I usually tell people is that you can't really just, remember like one rule or like read one book and like suddenly get better at design. Like the best way to get better is just like do a lot of design, like just make a lot of web mockups, do a lot of make a lot of graphics. Because stuff like this like spacing I mentioned earlier, those kind of stuff, it's really hard to like get it right. You just kind of have to gain experience and look at a lot of examples and kind of figure out kind of intuitively what spacing or like what layout, what composition works the best in what scenarios. So that's like my last bit of advice. Yeah, it takes long. It takes like several years for most people, including me.
Okay, awesome. Any other questions? Life, universe, anything?
I have a question, probably more for Matt. Are we trying to have any kind of like consistency among the different learning labs? Like, should we try to base our design off the ones you've already done?
That's a great question. So the short answer is no. There's 2 kinds of consistency with these learning labs. So one is internal. So all the ones in the series should have consistency. So that should be somewhat true. So for example, I think all the AI ones should use at least somewhat similar color schemes, like probably the AI blue. though that blue might change according to Tomoki. So we'll see
Yeah.
that. Similarly, right, if you guys use the same font for your PowerPoint slides, it might make sense to use the same font for your learning labs. In terms of having this be the same as like the cyber ones, no, not at all. Use whatever design you want. Even between the teams, if you use like a starkly different design in terms of some elements, like maybe your team uses a very rounded glass pane Apple style design, while the other team goes for a very boxy, box shadow material design thing, it's totally fine by me. I don't really mind, as long as it's still somewhat clear that like this was an ACM AI thing. There's the blue. There's the stuff that Tomoki has on his screen. The most important thing, though, is that your page needs to be consistent in itself. As long as you do that, most of the other things I think will come naturally. But you don't want to be in a situation, for example, where you switch fonts halfway through, or you use too many different shades of blue, or your font size isn't consistent for headings. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, definitely.
A quick tip, generally it's recommended to use no more than 3 fonts on a single website. Little fun fact.
Doesn't ACM have 4 fonts?
Yes, we do. We're going to cut that down, don't worry.
What are y'all doing?
One of them's the coding font. It's like for code. I think.
Any other questions? Life, universe, design, anything? If not, I'm going to give my YouTuber outro now. I want to thank Tomoki for coming out. Really appreciate it. It's always great to have guest lectures. And please, if you're watching at home, did you like our guest today? Comment down below. Give us some ratings. If you want to see other guests, let us know. You want to see Kevin come on and talk about iOS development? I'll send him an uwu. We'll figure it out. And also just in general, as always, we're here to help you with this Learning Lab experience. If you have any questions, DM us on Slack, comment on YouTube, let me know on GitHub, and we'll try to figure this out. Since this one was not written by me or Leo, we're not going to have notes. I'm going to see if I can get Zoom's auto transcribe feature to output a really crappy README and just put that in the GitHub repo, but I will recommend people to watch this video. But yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. Smash that like button, like and subscribe. Get us to 1 million followers, and we'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye.